beloved listeners. This is Adrienne, and what you're about to hear is a conversation that I had with Makani Themba on my Instagram. I'm doing a series that I'm calling Election Time with A and B. I was panicking and kind of freaking out and forgetting my center, my ground, my values, looking at the selection moment and getting very distracted. And I decided to reach out to some of the people I know who regularly ground me in different ways and just have a series of conversations asking questions about how to hold this line against fascism while not giving up our stance against genocide. And the conversations have been really incredible. After this one that you're going to hear with Makani, we didn't do any backup audio, so this is just the Instagram audio. And deep gratitude to our producer, Zach, for working with it and making something that we can post. After this, we started doing backup recordings. So the next ones you'll get to hear better audio on all of them. But I think that the conversation that we had is worth any moments of glitch in terms of the hearing. So I hope you agree and tune in. Upcoming, we have Malkia Devich Cyril. We have Ashley Woodward Henderson. We have Sindolo Dayamina. We have Michelle Mascarenas from Movement Generation. And then there's several more conversations I'm going to have. And if you missed it, you can go back and listen to the conversation with Hala that touches in on this. It was kind of before I knew it was going to become a thing. And then we still have Nalini Stamp and Farai Chideya coming up. And yeah, again, these conversations are just to help ground you. They've been incredibly grounding for me. Oh, there was also a conversation with Toshi Regan, which is written up. So we didn't record ourselves going back and forth, but I transcribed a set of text and voice memos into something that you can read. So you can scroll on my page. Everything on Instagram now is tagged Election Time with A and B if you want to watch the actual conversations as well. So Makani Themba is founder of the Praxis Project and has done tons of facilitation and strategic support of movements over the course of her career. And she is just someone who's able to think in a really massive way, a quantum way, a strategic way, and bring ourselves into like, what is the opportunity of the present moment? And yeah, this conversation with Makani took place the Thursday or Friday before Biden stepped down. So just for context and time, because everything is moving so fast, that's when we had the conversation. And again, I think it's quite prescient and interesting and spacious. Enjoy, learn something, pass it on. Love you. First of all, Makani, I wanted to say thank you so much for being willing to jump on and be in conversation with me. I had a conversation with Toshi and I published that conversation. I just shared, we were going back and forth. And I always laugh because I say Toshi gathers me, she gathered me because, I'll be every little while spinning out like, oh no. And Toshi's like, okay, now take a breath. And like, there's things to be concerned about, but like, we actually know how to do this. And so I was like, yeah, actually, I know a lot of people who know a lot about how we move through hard moments, how movement intersects with and uses the electoral process, but is not contained within it in any way. And you leapt to mind as someone who's been thinking about stuff for the whole time I've been doing movement work. I've been seeing you thinking strategically about how we think bigger, broader, more strategically, more long-term. And I know that you have some important thoughts that people need to be hearing right now. I also noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I keep looking and being like, who are the folks people are talking to as experts? And I'm like, y'all know Black women figure this thing out every time, but I don't see people talking to Black women, which is, always surprising to me. I'm like, but who's going to know about this better than the folks who always make it work? Anyway, so first of all, my love, how are you?
I am good. I am good. This just feels like it's been a good opportunity to stretch muscles. Like, when you hang a shower curtain, you're like, ooh, those things right there I don't know what they're called, but evidently I need to work them out some more.
Exactly. I need to, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, good.
So here we are. Yes, I'm feeling good about. I feel like I've gotten mature enough to understand this is a workout.
It is a workout. That's what this is. This is a workout.
Hmm.
I keep thinking of like, oh, like the muscles we need to strengthen and the opportunities to strengthen them. It's not always clear, it's that wax on, wax off.
That's right.
It's not always clear that like this is what we need to practice to do this whole other thing. Um, I want folks to know that you've been a movement strategist. I always was like, I co-facilitate with you, but you're like, but I'm a strategist. Like the work that I'm holding in the room is really facilitation from a place of being a strategist. And I wanted to ask you, as someone who has been inside of movement work, how long would you say you've been doing work within movement?
Ooh. Um, I started young,
Mhm.
so it's been almost 50 years. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Um, I want to ask you this question that my mentor, Grace Lee Boggs, used to ask everyone who visited her. And I thought it's been coming to mind a lot for me as a grounding question. And so I want to ask you, what time do you think it is on the clock of the world?
I love that question. I love her. She has said things to me personally that have absolutely changed my life in so many ways, so many ways. So to me, what time it is on a clock of the world is a time to understand and live with contradiction. You
Uh-huh.
know, to let go of boxes,
Yes.
to embrace the both and, and to understand that, as some of our grandmothers said, time is a lie. And so all of this science is doing, these huge equations around quantum physics, which our people already said, we're here and there,
At all times.
you know, at all times at the same
Yeah.
time. So that feels like what time it is on the clock of the world, is to understand and embrace the quantum time and the ways of holding things in a quantum way, which is not about boxes or either or.
Okay. Beautiful. I like that. Um, and I agree with you always. I'm always just
You
like,
always like the people are the smartest who you agree with. It's always that way.
I'm always like, ooh, I like that. Well, and I also think it helps so much because I see what the reductionist culture that is at the intersection of undereducating and over social mediaing people happens so that people feel very binary and they're thinking about almost everything right now.
That's
And
right.
it's like either this or that, and everyone has to get on the same boat. And I'm like, that's not how humans are. Humans never all get on the same agenda pathway. There's always what we say and what we do and who we do it with, and what they do, and what we're really doing versus what we say we do. Like, there's just like levels and levels and levels. And I keep seeing people being very either or with this moment where it's just like, you know, um, as if it's very black and white when actually there's just a lot in motion, like there's so
Exactly.
much emotion. And I want to say, for me, I keep struggling because I for these past 9 months plus now have been really focused on genocide, really focused on Palestine. And it's not what I thought I was going to be working on in this time. I thought I was going to be making a sex album. I was like, I'm ready to make an album about pleasure and sex, but my attention has been rightly on what's happening in Palestine, and I feel like I wish I'd gotten there sooner. And part of what I keep saying is I wish that people were at least understanding and talking about it. Like what hurts me so much is to feel like people keep trying to have this conversation as if that's not happening and as if that's not a factor, and just being like, just like as if it can just be set to the side and then on December
That's right.
pick it up or something. And I'm like, but all these people are dying every day. And
Exactly.
so how do we move, right? And so I'm like, oh, that's something I wish everyone understood right now, is that like this thing is happening every day. It's not on our election cycle. It's actually a constant threat. It's a constant action that the US is involved in. And it's not the only place where we're involved in it, you know? So I think that so many people are awakening to what the US is actually up to and how the US actually functions. And I think that's really important, to not let the awakening possibility pass. So I wanted to ask you this question, like, what do you wish more people understood about this moment and about where the election fits into this moment?
Yeah, I think what you've said is so important. One of the pieces,
Yeah.
I think, is about us learning once again how to live with what feels like pain. Because
Mm-hmm.
so much of what people are avoiding is like, oh, I just can't. I can't with this. I can't with that. And we come from people, and I mean the broadest we you can think of,
Yeah.
that learned how to manage and operate and live and thrive in the midst of hard things. And this idea, there's something about racial and gendered capitalism that on one hand creates, tries to recreate black women and particularly women of color as mules on one way, but on the other hand, it's like trying to make us so fragile that we have to depend on their products, their things for everything. And then we are told that we need to avoid this news, this reality, right? And so it kind of reminds me of a time in the 60s when people were sort of like in this sort of lull of a moment. I mean, I don't think black people were for the most part, but there was a big part of the world where things were happening, and all of a sudden people were like Vietnam. Oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, Sri Lanka. Just all these places where people are like, oh, there's a world out there, and the
Yeah.
way that this country is operating in the world is not aligned with my values, and I can't ignore it, right? And so it feels like we're in this period where for some people this is a new feeling,
Yeah.
right? To come to that contradiction, like how could I live this way and these things happen
Yeah.
on my watch? And some people are like, this is way too much. I don't know how to hold both things.
That's right.
But this holding both things, this or all the things, and being able to move and act and stand up and not feel like you'll fall apart,
Mm-hmm.
if as my mother taught me, the least we can do is be a witness. She's like, she would say to us, we're not getting shot at. We would go to those anti-war marches and all these things, and people would have like the babies that were burnt with the napalm and pictures. It was like hard. I remember that as a child. And
Yeah.
she'd say, well, be a witness. You're not there. That's the least we can do. And in this country, in many ways, that's part of what we're called to do, is be a witness, to
Yeah.
act, to stand in the gap, and to understand that whatever fragility we feel about it, it's not like living through it.
That's right.
And that's what I hope people understand in this moment. And I guess the other thing I'll just say really quickly is that also part of the way racial capitalism as quote unquote democracy, which is real elections is not the same as democracy. People get them confused all the time,
That
right?
down.
And
Slow
that,
that down. How do people get that
well,
confused?
they think that by voting, they are practicing democracy. When democracy is about choice and agency. And I don't know how many people feel like they have agency right now. And that sense of like, well, really, is it down to voting against a person and not voting for what I dream? Like that kind of constriction is an election.
Yeah.
But that's not the same as exercising your power and being able to choose. And there's all kinds of ways our governance could shift that could have more than that, which I won't get into. That would be another conversation. And maybe we will. But
Yeah.
but for this moment right now, that we're sort of herded into these choices, and there's a whole world out there of how we get to exercise our agency. And there are other countries where they're like, yeah, we don't like who's on there, so we're going to actually just show up at the Capitol. We're going to just ask, we're going to demand another thing.
Yeah.
And those things aren't necessarily even violent.
Yeah.
You know, it's more like we're going to act in our full agency and power and choose the future we want. So that's part of what I want people to understand, I guess, too, is that even though we have this what feels like a difficult choice in this election, that we still have opportunities to exercise democracy that's much bigger than this. And let's dream about that. Let's imagine it. My pastor, the church where I go to, he says to us that instead of saying Project 25, every time you hear it, say in your head Emancipation 2025. So just like how do we dream a different outcome, a different world? What can this represent for us? That's just way different.
I love that. Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I think that, you know, I always tease myself because I'm like, I'm a smart girl, but I can still have these places of like naivety, or like still be caught off guard, you know, by something. In some ways, I think it's because I live so deeply in vision world and in relationship with other people who are like, let's practice our vision with each other all the time, and like, let's have that be how we live. And then I'll like look over to my left and be, or to my right, and I'll be like, what the hell, guys? You know, like, what, you know? So I think that that's been part of it, is I'm like, oh, like I am focused on like stopping this genocide, and then tying it together with all these other genocides, and figuring out how to make art that like elucidates death culture and like all this stuff. And it didn't occur to me that the election would come and there would be no candidate option to move us out of this, right? That it was like, oh, that's not one of the things that could win. Like a non-genocide, post-genocide, or anti-genocidal candidate is not one of the people who could win in this moment. And folks keep telling me that, right? Definitively, like, that's just, Adrienne, you stop being naive. Like, it's this. And I appreciate it. You know, I appreciate when people try to be very no nonsense with me, because I don't think of imagination and vision as nonsense. I think of it as like very important spiritual work. And I constantly try to tie it into like, and also I want to be with what is, right? And part of that comes from reading Octavia's work all the time, right? Like, Octavia Butler tried to shed light. And one of the things she talked about was, she gives the example of building visionary community and not really tracking what's happening with the government, and then the government coming and destroying that visionary community space, right? And so, you know, and I'm looking at this election, I'm like, oh, what is the right amount of attention, basically, for someone like me as an artist and as a community member to be paying to this election? And so maybe I'll just stop with that. Like, for you, you know, as you're moving through your days, what is the amount of attention that you're actually giving to what the U.S. government is up to right now? That's, yeah, I think that's what I want to ask.
I think a fair amount, not only in terms of my intellectual attention, but my spiritual attention.
Yeah.
Every single day at my altar, every single day,
Yeah.
I am lifting up what's happening in Palestine, and lifting up, in fact, the way that I talk about it with my ancestors is, you know, for healing and justice and restoration everywhere where we don't see the one in one another, where we don't see each other, including my own heart, including my own heart. And I think in terms of the facts, quote unquote, the facts, right? It's been important to me to spend some time reading what people say outside of the U.S.
Yes.
I feel like in some ways that's helpful.
Very.
That's super helpful. And also what they're doing, like the ways in which people are exercising actual democracy.
Yeah.
It's so inspiring. Yeah. And so I feel like that's important for us, because maybe it'll catch fire. Maybe if we continue to put those pictures in front of us.
Yes.
And then also being a witness to the horror.
Yeah.
it's hard. It's not that I do it every day, but I appreciate Al Jazeera will put the names up,
Yep.
and it feels like as part of our spiritual work is to at least look at the names, to say them out loud in
Exactly.
spurts when we can, right? And to hold that and to affirm a world where that doesn't continue to happen, and and just the healing and love, and just in your money, where
Yeah.
can you send your money, like all those things. I feel like we need to we need to pay attention to, because the more of us who do it, the better, if that's a word
Yeah.
to use in this time, it is. And I also, you know, do really silly things. Like, silly is good for me. I
Sure.
am a silly person at heart. And come the revolution, I am looking forward to full-time silly. Which to me is one of the best reasons for me to get free. So I could just be silly all the time.
Yeah. I love that. I actually really love that. Um, I do want to ask you, like, on a strategy, as someone who like has been looking at this strategically, and you look at our structure, and I know you've been thinking about like what are the chunks of time in which we could actually have significant impact. Do you see a possibility for third party or other formations? You sort of hinted at this earlier, and you're like, I have a whole lot of thoughts about that. And we don't have to do a whole like deep dive workshop on that. We could if we wanted to. But like, do you know what I'm saying? Like in this moment where it's just like, it really feels like we would have gotten ourselves whittled down to like, in the electoral process, the only option is to vote against fascism. You know, are there options for third party growth or movement even in this moment? Or are there options for shifting our electoral process when it seems to be heading the other way? Like towards, I think of the rank elections and things like that. I remember, I'm like a little far from these things now, but I remember getting very excited about these other practices of democracy that I saw in other places. And is it like that ship has just sailed for the US in this moment?
I hope not. I mean, I believe in proportional representation.
Yeah.
That to me is the way out. And basically, that is that you vote for a party, that party gets votes. And some people who are watching South Africa, um, they may be familiar with that's the system that they have, and actually many countries have. So then folks then your votes matter, right? It's not like you just throw in your vote somewhere. It's like you add up, and that if you're 20% of that, they're going to need your 20% to be in there, right? To get those votes. So then you're able to bargain and fight. There are other things like um, having a minimum turnout. Right now, 3 people could vote in the United States and they could elect the president.
Yeah.
There's no minimum in terms of what is the
The legitimate.
absolute, like, what is this considered a legitimate, like, turnout for the election to be considered valid.
Mm-hmm.
And then our voices would matter too, because to say if it was 80% of the registered voters, which that's a whole nother game in terms of, are people who have served their time being able to vote. There's like all of these
Yes.
layers that I hope the ship has not sailed
Okay.
at all. But those are the things that need to be in place for a third party to really have the power that we hope. Now, saving that doesn't mean that it can't be built,
That's
that
right.
people can't be recruited. I mean, I am a member of Working Families
Mhm.
Party. That I live in Mississippi, so it's not like a thing. But I
Yeah.
give my money every month. I volunteer. I do what I can. And there are other third parties, Green, shout out to Cornell and Melina,
Yeah.
and all the people who are trying to have a different conversation. But right now, those folks don't get to be in the debate.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these things that together we could demand more. We can actually, like, people go, this is what democracy looks like. And I'm like, yeah, and there's a little more. There's a little
Yeah.
more. And so
We haven't gotten
let's
there
go
yet.
there. Yeah, let's go there. Let's go with the rule, because the rules matter.
Yes.
and our voices matter, and that idea, and this moment right here where people are feeling, you know, like, oh my God, this is awful. These are both hard votes for me to make. My people in Palestine, like, they can't be ignored. Or someone saying to me, oh, well, are you being a single issue voter? And I'm like, wait, are
Yeah.
you kidding me?
Gotten that too.
Are you actually kidding me? Like, I'm not a single issue voter, and I don't know if anyone saw Josh Johnson, I think, is that his name? Who's the stand up comedian who also is on Daily Show.
Oh.
And he did this focus group with black people who were split evenly between Trump and Biden. And it was a really intense but interesting
Yeah.
conversation. And I just say all this to say that that both sets of folks didn't feel great about, didn't feel perfect. They didn't feel like, they felt like they were more against the other person than they were for a thing.
Mm.
And so if we were to fight for this space or create this space, because I also believe we can manifest all the things,
Yeah.
we're magic, that if we can create this space for our voices to be, I mean, why shouldn't democracy be about what we love, not what we can just barely stand, but
Yeah.
what we love? We deserve that.
I love that. I really love you saying that, and also sort of breaking down, like, there's pre-existing conditions that we would need to secure that would actually make the path for third party elections matter and impactful. And I think this is really helpful for me because people keep asking, what do you think of this person? What do you think of that person? I'm like, it's heartbreaking how much I love that person, how much I am aligned with that person, how much I wish that that was one of the viable options. And as someone who does think strategically in this way, I'm like, oh, I can't see the path by which they actually create the block that we need right now. I haven't had quite the language for it, but it really helps to be like, we need proportional voting. We need them to be included in debates. We need this, we need that, like, it really helps to be like, oh yeah, the path for that is, I also think Working Families Party is exciting to me. For folks who are following this conversation who don't know, one of the things that Working Families Party does is they look at the existing elections and who are the candidates that are actually going to be best for workers, and they align around that, right? And they're like,
Right.
help people, like, be like, oh, you can move your vote towards this person. I think that that's a really helpful thing, rather than, I feel like they're constantly thinking, like, how do we move outside of this party system and build something that's about workers, about those who actually do the labor of this country. Um, so I'm a big fan of their work. I'm actually
Yes.
bring on Nalini Stamp is going to come on and talk to us a little bit
Yes.
from that
Well, I'm
position.
sure she's going to say amazing things.
Yeah.
I have so much love, and also just, I mean, when we get to that place, we won't even use the term third party because it
No,
won't be about one and two.
exactly. Yeah.
It's just going to
Multiple
be
parties. So,
parties and the ones you love and people figuring out the combinations and paying attention to power,
mm-hmm.
because voting is not power if you don't like who you're voting for. I mean, it is a form of
Yeah.
power in a way, but it's pretty watered down
Yeah.
compared to what our power could potentially be. And in many ways, and I believe in voting. I vote all the time. I don't miss an
Yeah.
election. I think it's
Yeah.
important. And I also learn from people like Fannie Lou Hamer, who you can see her in the corner of my
Yes.
that who was like, we have, can you imagine being black people in Mississippi in the 60s and saying, you know what, it doesn't, these people aren't going to let us vote, we're going to create our own plebiscite, we're going to vote, we're going to show up at the convention, we're going to say the things that need to be said, and all the things that they were able to move. And I think us this is also a time for us to have a deeper understanding of power and
Yeah.
all the dimensions of it, because that's the other story they tell us, that voting is our power, and it is a tool
Yeah.
for power, But there are so many more dimensions, and and that's one of the things I'm really excited about in this book that I'm almost done with. Thank you, Adrian. um, about,
Tell
you know,
us,
just
tell us more, Makani. Tell us more.
well, it's, it's called Our Beautiful Next is the title,
Mm. Oh, that's
and yeah, it's not bad, it's
that's
not bad,
good. No, that's good.
it's
Good.
not bad. I'm
I'm a little
excited
jealous.
about it. Well, you're helping to make this possible, so I'm grateful.
Mm.
And one of the things that, in addition to narrative and story, is exploring dimensions of power, and
Yeah.
helping. I hope help people understand more about these various dimensions, including our spiritual power, the power that our ancestors drew on to move through these hard times, because people try to act like that's not a part of it, but we would not be here
We
without it.
wouldn't. We wouldn't. And I think, I mean, I'm really glad you're bringing this in, Makani, because I think this has been a part of the thing from, it's like I can feel myself get grabbed up and pulled into what I call the mainstream narrative of how the world is, where it's like everything that matters about me is like what I decide to do at this one election in this one moment, whatever. And there's a way I can discount the whole rest of my life and the whole rest of what I know about how these systems work. And then I take a deep breath and kind of drop out of just that reactionary mind, that reactionary mindset. And I remember like, oh, my cycle is in relationship to the earth. My rhythm is in relationship to the earth. My accountability is 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. My practice is Sankofa. My politic is emergent strategy. My politic is that I'm a wild creature on a wild earth and we're doing wild things. And trying to, it's just like I have to take a deep breath back into like who I am and then look at this moment through that lens where I'm like, oh, this country, is founded on a wound that has never healed. And like this is what it looks like when that is allowed to fester and fester and fester and fester. And we don't check it, we don't heal it, we don't attend to it. But I also think that we can get it's like time is not real and we can misunderstand where we are inside of what we're commonly believing. So I think about our ancestors too. And like those first elections where I was like, I know that y'all weren't voting for someone that you felt excited about. I know that you were having to vote for the better of options that both saw you as lesser than them. And I know that you had, like, I know that our ancestors had to go through that. And then I know that we've gone through getting a taste of, oh, actually, here's what it feels like to stand behind a candidate that I am 10 toes down for. I've had that experience. And locally, here's what it's like to vote for someone at the national level that I'm like, I think this person could do the job well, right? Like, that's not a given, but I have tasted that. But I can't confuse that with the norm, right? That
That's
we are
right.
still coming out of Jim Crow. I don't think we're out of it. I think we're in a new cycle of it, and I'm so glad Michelle Alexander has written this for us. I'm like, we're in this new phase of how people get enslaved, how people get imprisoned, how people's rights are stripped from them. I think this move on making homelessness illegal is fortifying that, right? Is fortifying like oh, like a bad a fucked up economy and making homelessness illegal creates perfect conditions for having all of these people who are no longer able to stay out of the criminal system. And I'm like, that we're still in that time where like there's people walking by us every day who want to make us slaves again, and they're gaining more and more power. We're still in this time of people who want to colonize the world. We're still in this time. And so I think it's like helping people also remember like we're we're not in the world of of those who have the greatest privilege being the norm for everyone. We're not there. We're still in this world of like we haven't shaken off enslavement. We haven't shaken off the wound of it. We haven't shaken off the pain of it. And that's the condition in which we're voting. And we're also voting in an empire that is starting to collapse and fall apart, and where the whole rest of the world, when you look at how the whole rest of the world is aligning when it comes to climate, aligning when it comes to genocide, aligning when it comes to economy, aligning when it comes to like these things. And then you see this fascist thing trying to come in and be like, no, like, yeah. I'm like, that's what we're in. right? So it's like locally, there's a massive regression. Internationally, there's a massive regression, but there's also like a coalescing against empire. And it's
Yes,
actually quite an exciting time, I think, if you look at it that way, because it's like, oh, the opportunity we have in this moment is like, yeah, sure, election, and also huge opening for us to be
exactly.
practicing in alignment with this global body.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I think also that part of the reason why um, fascism tends to coalesce,
Mm,
because it's about the patterns, right, too.
that's right.
I mean, not that they're exactly the same, but it
Mm,
has to do when capitalism sags and there's a need to organize capital in different ways, um, then the corporations get behind the people who can organize capital to to keep them
right.
going. And so, one of the things that I think is going to also be important, because this is also what democracy is too, is that we have to do a better job of exercising our power in the context of capital.
Yeah.
Because where do they get the capital from? Us,
Us.
us. And so,
Either our
and so that
labor or our
our
spending.
labor
Us.
are spending in both
Yeah.
usually,
Yeah.
right? And or the extraction
Yes.
of our time, like all these things, our eyeballs are all, we are the capital.
That's right.
And so as we kind of move into this place, which I am hopeful, and the picture I hold is from Alexis Pauline Gumb's short story about, where we talk about the great, where they refer to the Great Awakening. Like,
Yes.
if we wake up to who we are in
Yes.
this system and what it means, and then beyond that, like, and then to trust each other enough to find each other and come together,
Yes.
because those are the two big ways in which the disruption happens, like what we think about ourselves and what we think about the others,
That's right.
right?
That's
and
right.
that and then if we can think about, like, how do we disrupt the power behind it all, which is capital. Like, we get so focused on that personality and that asshole and that old person and that thing, but it's like
Yeah.
the game, they're just pieces on the board like us, bigger
Yeah.
pieces, more mobility,
Yeah.
but still they're not the people moving the pieces.
That's right.
So how do we get smarter about that level of disruption, which is also what we learn from other countries, where
That's right.
people are like, we're going to go in, we're going to do this policy, we're going to figure that out. And I am hoping that as we
Mm.
think about, especially in a place like Mississippi, where we are um, pretty disenfranchised in terms of our state legislature, there's way more folks holding seats than there are us,
Yeah.
right? And it has nothing to do with the numbers. There's no actual democracy. There's no one person, one vote here.
Got it.
It's
Yeah.
it's
Got
it doesn't work that way at all. So then we have to go the corporate route. We have to get the people who have the power and the dollars to put the pressure to move the
Yeah.
things that we need moved that our votes can't move. So for us to think broadly about that, to
Yeah.
be rooted in our spirit, to be rooted in the absolute, just complete conviction that we deserve
Yes.
all the love, all the freedom, all the liberation, and that there are other people out there who are just as smart as we are, who have figured it out.
That's right.
That right
That
there.
right there, Makani, because this is one of my favorite things right now is being like, one of the awakenings for folks who live particularly in the United States, I think, is the awakening, like, we've been told our whole lives that we're like number one and the best and the smartest, and like we're the ones who need to manage the rest of the world. We're the ones who need to intervene, and it's like the humility it takes to be like, actually, we're not the smartest country on earth or the smartest people on earth or anything, and that there's other folks who have really tried stuff, and particularly people who are like, well, I wasn't raised inside of the limitations of the US experiment. And so what I think is possible for a community is much broader, much wider, much more active, much more loving, much more interdependent than what y'all are practicing. And so while we've been exporting out our individualism, other places have been resisting that with their collectivism, and they can teach us if we will humble ourselves and learn. And even as you were speaking, I was like, yeah, like Palestinians have been in this struggle for 75 plus years. And the thing that has emerged as the most strategic move from them is boycott, divest, and sanction. And that's what happened in South Africa. Like, that's one of the ways that people intervene once a nation gets out of control. And I'm like, it's time for folks around the globe to be boycott, divesting, and sanctioning us, the US, I think. But it's also time for us within our local communities to be thinking more and more that way, of like where we spend our resources and our time and where we go and what we normalize. Like, we set the culture and we set what can and cannot go forward. And I really love you bringing us back to that. So, I had these last two questions, one of which I think I've got, which is, what do you see as right action in this moment? And I feel like what I hear from you is like, yes, get out and vote. That was a fought for ancestral right that we need to go out and practice, and vote the best option that you can see, the most strategic option that you can see, and also remember and awaken your power at the spiritual level, at the community level, at the relational level. Is that,
I think that's right. And also for us to really, those of us who are the ones who's kind of have the resources and the energy and the capacity to think strategy, we got to think about what our corporate, interventions are around the capital. And also the vote part too is about down ballot. There's good
down
people
ballot.
out here. Good people out here transforming where they are.
It's so funny. There's this artist, Layla, who does like remixes of pop songs and like makes them political. And I haven't had the time to actually pull it out, but I keep walking around being like, down ballot voting for the squad. Like, I'm like trying to take this song, this Taylor Swift song, and like make it, make her relevant by making one of her songs like relevant. Mm-hmm. But I keep being like, oh, down ballot it's also how we protect what we can protect in this moment, right? Because I'm like, I remember back in the 2003, 2004 election cycle, folks being like, the right is starting to really aim for all of these lower level political positions and placing their folks in the sheriff's role, placing their folks on the city
council. That in the 80s too.
Exactly, right? So it's like that's been happening, and like those are often positions we're not informed about, and so we don't even participate in the local election, don't vote down ballot. And this feels like, yeah, I'm really glad that you're reminding us. It's like there's so much more happening than just these two people, stubborn people with their different problems. Okay, so the last thing, I think you've been saying it also all along, and I wanted to name it, ask it explicitly of you, which is, what are you doing to what are you practicing to protect your beliefs during this time? So, sorry, I see some questions. What is a down ballot? So the top of the ballot is the presidential election. So we're voting for the president who comes along with their VP. Like that's, but then down ballot is all the other elections that are happening. So we're talking about Congress. It's a really big deal right now. Like it's, if us from sinking into the abyss. And we have gone through periods where the president was the only thing helping us from sinking into this, or other things. But the way our government is structured, it's supposed to be these different bodies that are holding each other accountable. And right now what we have is a situation where Supreme Court is off the rails, a lot of Congress is off the rails, and presidency is off the rails. And so it's a triple bad. And so down ballot is saying, like, how do we position some more people to be able to stave off some of the bad while we figure out the Supreme Court crisis, and while we survive whatever this presidential crisis is.
Yeah, and also I would just add, it's like your city council, your
Exactly.
dog catcher, like all the local things. And some people are fighting to have more things elected that weren't
Hmm.
elected before. So that's great. Like,
Yeah.
in DC they have the ANC, in LA they have neighborhood councils. So the more we can elect, the
Yes,
better.
that's great. Um, okay, so just want to make sure that that was clear for folks, especially, one of the things I really appreciate is that so many people around the world are actually having to pay attention to our election because what happens here trickles down and impacts everyone elsewhere, especially impacting migration patterns and how finances are flowing. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in from other places, and we'll try to make it as clear as we can. So, final question for you, my love, is what are you practicing to protect your beliefs during this time? And this also feels like the holding contradictions piece. It's like, I believe this, and how I feel like I'm doing work every day to like protect the part of me that's like, I know what I believe and I know what I stand for, and that I'm making the best choices I can. And I'd love to hear what you're practicing for that.
I think I'm in a place in my practice where I don't feel like I have to protect anything. It just is.
Uh-huh.
And I'm so grateful. And I feel like that's a gift of the pandemic. I spent so much time by myself that it was like, oh, I got to really, build that
Yeah.
muscle. And who knows what's ahead?
Yeah.
But right now, I feel so anchored.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful. I haven't always felt that way. But I feel like whatever it is, I'm good. We good. We are good.
I needed to hear you say that, Makani. Thank you. I love you so
I love
much.
you so
So
much.
much. You're such a good thinker and teacher, and I am excited for everyone to get our beautiful next in their hands as soon as you're ready to give it to us. Um,
Yes.
and I'm going to post this so that it lives on my page. I'm going to invite you to collaborate on it. So when I send that invitation to you, it'll also live on your page. So we both have access
Absolutely.
to it. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. If this was
Yes.
helpful to you, I'm going to be talking to Malkia Cyril. I'm going to be talking to Nalini Stamp. I'm going to be talking to Farai Chidea. I'm still listening for, who else makes sense to bring into this conversation. But if this felt helpful to you, send it to people. The whole reason I want to have these conversations is to help other people be able to land and feel centered and grounded as we move through this moment. So I hope it's helpful, and we'll see you soon. Love you.